On March 13th of 1997, which just so happens to be the year I was born, a string of 5 lights in a V formation appeared in the sky above Phoenix, Arizona. The National UFO Reporting Center reported that the first call about the lights came in at around 8:16 p.m. from a retired police officer in Paulden, which is about 2 hours north of Phoenix. After that, the National UFO Reporting Center began to receive a slew of calls from south of Paulden, suggesting that the lights were moving in a southeastern direction. There are more than 700 witnesses who saw the lights, including pilots, police officers, and military officials who lit up the National UFO Reporting Center switchboard, demanding explanations, and rightfully so. Most of the witnesses described the lights as part of a singular massive craft that made no noise. Around 10 p.m., a second set of as many as, 9 lights appeared in the sky. A laser printer technician named Dana Valentine claimed to have witnessed the craft from his yard in Phoenix, saying that he could see the outline of the mass behind the lights and was certain what he saw was technology unknown to mankind. Air traffic controllers could not see the lights on the radar, despite seeing them in the sky with their own eyes. Frances Barwood, the Phoenix City Councilwoman who launched an investigation into the event, said that out of the over 700 witnesses, 700 that she interviewed, the government never interviewed even one. This is once again where I'm giving the US government some well-deserved side-eye. How do you not interview a single witness out of 700? That is way too many people for this to not be credible. And once again, like I've said many times before here, so many witnesses happen to be credible air personnel. I'm sensing a pattern of behavior here and not a good one. In 4th place, we have a case of reincarnation. In the 1940s, Florence and John Pollock were married, and in 1946, after having 2 sons, they welcomed their first daughter, who was named Joanna. In 1951, Florence gave birth to another baby girl named Jacqueline. Despite their age differences, the 2 girls had an extremely close bond. Joanna liked to take care of Jacqueline and saw herself as the ultimate big sister. Since her mother was busy running the family's grocery delivery business, Joanna saw herself as a second mother to her little sister. They enjoyed playing dress up and pretending, and generally enjoyed being around each other. Thank goodness, because parentification is often more traumatizing than beneficial. Eerily, Joanna would always state that she would never grow up to become a lady, that she would remain young forever. No one took her seriously and chalked it up to a very creative imagination. Kinda like how I've always had. On May 7th of 1957, mid-single digits-year-old Jacqueline and double-digits-year-old Joanna were walking to church with a neighborhood boy, as they often did. While they were walking, a car came up behind them and it hit them going at an incredibly high speed, killing all 3. The Pollock sisters died instantly, and the boy they were with died from his injuries at the hospital. The woman who was driving the car had just lost her wards in a custody battle and was feeling angry and upset and was actually trying to take her own life. While learning about her ward's deaths, Florence fell into a deep depression that lasted a very long time. John, on the other hand, had the spiritual belief that the girls were in heaven or that they'd be reincarnated. He said he would have dreams about the girls and also felt some sort of presence in their bedroom. He claimed that every time he would go in there, he felt like he wasn't alone, like they were watching over him. Now, John apparently always had a fascination with reincarnation and would pray to God to bring his daughters back. Okay, Florence, on the other hand, was a very strict Catholic and never toyed with any of John's notions about reincarnation. This put such a strain on the relationship that they almost got a divorce. However, somehow, they stayed together and got pregnant again. Congrats, I guess. From the beginning of the pregnancy, John thought that there were 2 babies, despite the doctor only claiming 1. However, John kept insisting that there were 2, and the doctor was proven wrong on the day that the twins Jillian and Jennifer were born on October 4th of 1958. Twins never ran in the family, and Florence never felt like she had 2 fetuses growing inside of her. Eerily, the newborn twins had the exact same birthmarks that Joanna and Jacqueline had, and Florence started to seriously consider her husband's beliefs as more than just nonsense. When the twins were old enough to talk, they began identifying and requesting toys that belonged to their sisters, who had passed on, and would point out landmarks that only Joanna and Jacqueline would have known, like the school they attended. They would sometimes panic upon seeing cars and knew about street safety without either of their parents telling them about it. The story of the Pollock sisters made its way to Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychologist who studied reincarnation. After studying thousands of reincarnation cases, Dr. Stevenson wrote a book telling of 14 cases he believed to have been real, including that of the Pollock sisters. Reincarnation is such a wild thing to think about. Personally, I don't know if I'd want to start all over with all the current knowledge and trauma that I have and then add more. I think I'd rather just be wiped clear and restart. Nah. Let me know in the comments what you think though, and if you want to be reincarnated or just hit restart. In third place, we have the incident at Dyatlov Pass. On the first night of February 1959, 9 ski hikers had set up camp on a slope in the Russian mountains, enjoyed dinner, and prepared for sleep. But something went catastrophically wrong because the group never returned to civilization. On February 26th, searchers found the hikers' abandoned tent, which had been ripped open from the inside. Surrounding the area were footprints left by the group, some wearing socks, some wearing a single shoe, some barefoot, all of which continued to the edge of a nearby wood, which is where the first 2 bodies were found, shoeless and wearing only underwear. The scene bore marks of death by hypothermia, but as medical examiners inventoried the bodies, as well as the other 7 that were discovered over the months that followed, hypothermia was no longer making sense. As a matter of fact, the evidence made no sense at all. One body had evidence of a blunt force trauma, another had third-degree burns, one had been vomiting a red liquid that should still be in their veins, yet another one was missing a tongue, and some of their clothing was found to be radioactive. Alrighty, this is where I would just call it a day and condemn the entire freaking area. That's one too many weird variations to make sense in my brain. Also, anything radioactive? Burn it. Burn it all. Theories about what happened include KGB interference, drug overdose, UFO presence, gravity anomalies, and a Yeti? The most recent theory involves a terrifying but real phenomenon called infrasound, in which the wind interacts with the topography to create a barely audible hum that can induce powerful feelings of nausea, panic, dread, chills, nervousness, raised heartbeat rate, and breathing difficulties. Add that to my list of why I never want to go hiking. Granted, I didn't really want to go hiking in the first place. In second place, we have the Watcher House. In June of 2014, Maria and Derek Broaddus and their 3 spawn were getting ready to move into their new home, 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. They claimed the 6-bedroom house was their dream home, and it just so happened to be located a couple of blocks away from Maria's childhood home in one of the top 30th safest cities in the United States. Sounds a little too good to be true if I'm adding my 2 cents to this. 3 days after closing the sale, before the Broaddus family had even begun to move in, a letter arrived in their new mailbox. The letter was addressed to the new owner in big clunky handwriting and read as follows: Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within? 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look out any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard and at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Yeah, okay. The letter also mentioned specifics about the Broaddus family, talking about the offspring and that the unknown author had seen them, stating that, so far I think there are 3 that I've counted. Do you need to fill the house with the young I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was agreed to bring me yours? Once I know their names, I will call them and draw them to me. Yeah, okay. Pardon the narrator voice, I just like to differentiate. At the bottom of the letter, the author used a cursive font to sign The Watcher. Okay, this is where I wish I had a red flag to start waving around, so just imagine it in my hand. Okie dokie? After receiving the letter, the Broaddus family reached out to the previous family who had sold them the house, John and Andrea Woods. They stated that during the 23 years of living at 657 Boulevard, they had never received a letter like that except once, a few days before they were getting ready to move out of the house. The Woods family also stated they had never felt watched in the 2 decades they had lived at the house, and in fact, rarely felt the need to lock their door at night. While they thought the note they received was odd, they threw it away without much concern. Red flag notice again. That's something people should know about. Thankfully, the 2 families went to the police with the letters, and an investigation was opened. The police warned the families not to tell anyone about the letters, including their neighbors who were all suspects. 2 weeks later, even though the Broaddus family still hadn't moved in, they received a second letter with even more chilling specifics about the family, including the offspring's birth order and nicknames. The Watcher also asked if the Wards would sleep in the attic, or would the entire family sleep on the 2nd floor. Who has bedrooms facing the street? I will know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. This is where I would have done everything in my power to avoid ever going near that place and moving across the country. Nope, 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 nope. Pardon me, stalking and harassment are issues that really get under my skin. Several weeks later, when the Broaddus family had put their plans on hold to move in, a 3rd letter arrived saying, "Where have you gone to? 657 Boulevard is missing you." Okay, by the end of 2014, the case had stalled completely. There was no digital trail, and the mental effects were taking a toll on the Broaddus family. No kidding! That kind of watching over your shoulder can take a mental toll like you wouldn't believe unless you've gone through it yourself. There were no fingerprints and no way to place somebody at the scene of the crime. Only 6 months after they received the letters, they decided to sell the home. Good on them for doing so. This place has since been sold and is currently off the market, while the watcher's identity still remains a mystery. In first place, we have a case of human combustion. What can I say? I thought I'd end today on a fiery note. On July 2nd of 1951, in St. Petersburg, Florida, Mary Reeser was visited by her son, Dr. Richard Reeser, in her apartment and mentioned during their conversation that she had taken 2 mild sedatives and planned to take 2 more before bed. Hey, whatever helps you sleep. Later that night, she would fall asleep in an upholstered chair for the last time, as she would become the victim of an apparent house fire. The next morning, Mary's landlord reported smelling smoke around 5 a.m. But it wasn't until 8 a.m. when she went to go deliver a telegraph to Mary that she would smell the smoke again. She discovered soot in the hallway, and the doorknob leading to Mary's apartment was too hot to grab, so she enlisted the help of nearby house painters to get into the apartment. What they found inside said apartment was truly horrifying. Mary's skull was reportedly shrunk to the size of a cup, and parts of her spine also remained. Her left foot was found still in its black satin slipper with the skin unburned, but the rest of her remains had been, completely cremated. What makes this case even more odd, because that wasn't odd enough, was the environment of her surroundings. Fun science fact for everyone: in order for a body to be cremated, the body must burn at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 to 4 hours. But somehow the surrounding area of Mary's chair and the rest of her apartment were relatively unaffected. The walls had no burn marks and showed no signs of scorching or burned paint. Light switches were melted, but outlets were still completely functional. Candlesticks had melted, but their wicks stood upright. And a stack of newspapers close to the chair was, undamaged. You know, the easily flammable thing. Mary's neighbors were also unaware of the fire. Look, I can write off a list of things that wouldn't faze me from a neighbor at this point in my life, but the smell of smoke is definitely something I would be freaking out about. The FBI eventually came up with some form of cover-up, but I'm not gonna waste anyone's time with that since it doesn't make any sense.
In at 5, Dear David. On August 7th, 2017, Adam Ellis took to Twitter to tell his terrifying encounter with a ghost named David. It began on a Monday, I quote, "So my apartment is currently being haunted by the ghost of a dead child and he's trying to kill me. He started appearing in dreams, but I think he's crossed over into the real world now. The first time I saw him, I was experiencing sleep paralysis and saw a child sitting in the green rocking chair at the foot of my bed. He had a huge misshapen head that was dented on one side. For a while he just stared at me, but then he got out of the chair and started shambling towards the bed. I couldn't move because I was paralysed. Right before he reached my bed, I woke up screaming. I had another dream a few nights later where I was in a library and a girl came up to me and said, 'You've seen Dear David, haven't you?' I was like, 'Who?' And she said, 'Dear David, you saw him.' She continued, 'He's dead. He only appears at midnight and you can ask him 2 questions if you said Dear David first.' Then she added, 'But never try to ask him a 3rd question, or he'll kill you.' I was very shaken. Having 2 dreams about the same thing is pretty weird. Anyway, a couple weeks passed without incident. Then David came back in another dream. Same situation. I was in bed and he was sitting in the rocking chair near the window, staring at me. In the dream I say, 'Dear David, how did you die?' He mumbles, 'An accident in a store.' I say, 'Dear David, what happened in the store?' He groans. 'A shelf was pushed on my head.' I'm frozen with fear. I ask, 'Who pushed the shelf?' David doesn't answer. I realise that I've asked a 3rd question, which I'm not supposed to do. At that point I wake up absolutely terrified. The next couple of days I Google deaths in the city but can't find anything about a kid named David dying in a store. Even try different names, Daniel, Dylan, Devon, nothing. A few weeks go by without incident. Sort of randomly the apartment above mine is vacated and I have the opportunity to move into it. It's a larger apartment, so I'm thrilled. Another month or 2 goes by and I sort of forget about Dear David. I think he lost track of me because I moved upstairs. But lately something strange is happening. For the last 4 nights my cats gather at the front door at exactly midnight and just stare at it, almost like something is on the other side. And that's where I am right now. Dear David found me, I think. I don't know what to do. I'll keep you updated. And that he did. Dear David continued for over a year. The story is long but so terrifying and I wish I could read the entire thing out, but that would take hours and everyone would hate me. but we'll link it below. In at 4, Full Heart, Wet Hands. Now this story was submitted to the website My Uni Days by author Alex, who says, I quote, "So, I used to live at this address." They blacked it out. "The houses were built to house the people building the railway in Derby in the 1800s. I only found this out after I left the house, thankfully. It was a creepy house, really foreboding, and every time I washed my hair in the shower, every time I opened my eyes, I expected something to be there. Anyway, came back from an afternoon lecture, opened the door, walked up the first flight of stairs and saw a wet handprint on the floor, a really wet handprint. I was a bit like, very strange. At that moment, but I didn't freak out. It was just out of the ordinary. So I walked up to see my housemate, Ed. I opened the door and he was on the phone to his girlfriend. Not crying, but massively in distress. That was when the penny dropped. He then told me that as he was walking up the stairs earlier carrying a glass of water, he felt something cold go through him, almost a push, causing him to drop the water. He picked up the glass and ran up the stairs to his room. The water falling out the glass had created a handprint on the floor. Literally a handprint. Every digit was in proportion. I did freak out at this moment as I'd put the 2 and 2 together. I told everyone to get out of the house, which we did, but then sheepishly returned after a fever session around another friend's house. It was genuinely terrifying. Might not sound it, but it was. And all true. If someone offered me $50 to go back and spend the night there by myself, despite the fact that I lived there for a year without almost no incident, I wouldn't. There was something there that didn't want 6 college guys there. This is truly terrifying, and I likely would have done the same thing. Run. Something was clearly lingering in the home that wasn't at ease. Now the handprint has the potential of making, but the sensation of a person pushing you, now that is something else entirely. No thank you. Also, you'd have to pay me more than $50 to go back. In at 3, Villa de Vecchi. Just east of Lake Como in the forested mountains of Cortanova lies a house that is said to be haunted, nicknamed the Red House, Ghost Mansion and Casa della Stray, built between 1854 to 1857 as the summer residence of Count Felix de Vecchi. However, as most creepy stories go, a few short years after its completion, the house witnessed an inexplicable string of tragedies that would forever haunt its walls. First, architect Alessandro Sodoli died a year before the villa was completed, and many would later speculate his death was the first omen. The family moved in nonetheless, and during the spring and summer months they led an idyllic and, well, brief existence. Sometime in 1862 things took a turn when the Count returned home to find his wife brutally murdered and daughter missing. He then put on a lengthy and sadly unsuccessful search for his daughter before committing suicide that same year. The villa was then passed on to Felix's brother Diego, who continued to live on the estate with his family until World War II, after which time they vacated for good. The house bounced around various owners and renters for a while until being left permanently uninhabited by the 1960s. Naturally, elements have taken over the home, but the large majority of damage has been done by humans. Graffiti covers the walls and almost everything in the house has been vandalized. However, its rumors of hauntings, ritualistic orgies and sacrifices is what leaves the home unoccupied. Spookier still, in 2002 an avalanche wiped out all of the surrounding homes in the area, all except the Villa de Vecchi. Now, although trespassers always return, they always leave with hauntings to report. In at 2, Los Feliz Murder Mansion. During the mid-20th century, the Los Feliz Mansion was a seemingly happy home. For a short time, that is. It housed Dr. Harold Perelson and his family until the horrific night of December 6, 1959. It was on that night that Harold struck his wife to death with a hammer, severely beating his daughter, then ended his own life using a concoction of water, acid and tranquilizer pills. Now, for the next 50 years, the murder mansion would remain completely untouched and uninhabited by anyone. 1 year after the horrific events, the home was sold to a couple, Emily and Julian Enriquez, who only used the mansion as a storage unit. Imagine being that rich. Lucky for some. Neighbors recall seeing the couple bringing boxes to the house but never staying the night. Jump forward to 1994 and Rudy Enriquez inherited the house and, like his parents, refused to stay overnight. Local residents have shared their stories of the tragic mansion, some claiming through grimy windows you can see a 1950s style television set, a Christmas tree and supposedly neatly wrapped gifts. The furniture is rumored to be covered in a thick layer of dust, and the living room remains the exact same as it was that one December night back in 1959. Now, although no one has been formally invited into the home, that hasn't stopped trespassers from having picnics in the garden, with many alleging that the house is haunted, with one trespasser stating that she was bitten by a black widow spider upon trying to break in. No one knows what prompted Dr. Perelson to murder his wife and commit suicide, with some speculating financial woes, while others have dug up old unconfirmed rumours of Dr. Perelson having been secretly hospitalised. Jump forward to 2019, what remains is an even larger mystery in a haunted home that no one can enter. And finally, coming in at number 1, Jean Harlow's house. Los Angeles seems to be the hub for paranormal activity, or perhaps it's because it's the hub for movies and everyone is a storyteller. We'll never know. Anyway, in LA you can find this Bavarian-style home in Beverly Hills, which has a truly gruesome history. In 1932, it was home to Jean Harlow and her abusive husband Paul Byrne for about 2 months before he shot himself in the head while standing in front of the mirror. Their butler discovered him and called MGM instead of the police. So of course there were a ton of rumors that it wasn't suicide, and in turn a cover-up. Prime suspect was Byrne's ex-girlfriend, a suspicion that was exasperated by her jumping off a boat a couple days after. Following the death, Jean moved out of the home but died at the age of 26 only a few years later. However, it gets creepier. In 1963, celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring bought the home and lived there with Sharon Tate until she left him for Roman Polanski. They were still friends even up until they were both murdered by Charles Manson's cult. However, when Jay and Sharon lived in the Harlow house, Sharon reportedly told several friends of some strange goings on within the home. An example being once when she was sleeping in the master bedroom, she saw a creepy little man, with some of her friends stating that she believed it was the ghost of Paul Byrne. According to sources, she was so freaked out when she saw the ghost that she ran out of the room and then saw a hanging shadowy corpse with its throat slit in the hallway, which resembles quite closely how Sharon Tate was murdered. Coming in at 5, Hotel Monte Vista, Arizona. Hotel Monte Vista is a famous and historic hotel located 1 block north of US Route 66 in Flagstaff, Arizona. The hotel was built back in 1927 and is a centerpiece of the historic downtown district. However, it's become more popular for the otherworldly goings-on inside its walls. Guests who have stayed in room 220 have experienced the TV changing channels on its own, and some even said they have felt cold hands touching them while they slept. However, arguably the most popular ghost story to emerge from the hotel is that of the phantom bellboy, who is said to knock on doors and announce room service, but when guests open their doors no one's there. Another popular haunting, and perhaps one of the most disturbing, is the sound of an infant crying in the basement. I quote, "Staff have found themselves running upstairs to escape the sound of the cries. Though the sounds are very real to those who hear them, there's been no information that has explained the phenomenon." That is a direct quote from the hotel's website. Spooky. Would you dare stay there? Coming in at 4, Ariana Grande's haunting. Now, we have a Hollywood ghost story at this number coming from the mouth of none other than Ariana Grande. Yep, that's right. Ariana Grande was supposedly haunted by a ghost back in 2013 when she visited Stull Cemetery in Kansas, a place that is supposedly so scary the Pope refuses to fly over it because it's reputed to be one of the 7 gates to hell. Yeah. Ariana explained to Complex, I quote, "I felt this sick, overwhelming feeling of negativity over the whole car, and we smelled sulfur, which is the sign of a demon, and there was a fly in the car, randomly, which is another sign of a demon." That sounds like a stretch to me. "I was like, this is scary, let's leave." I rolled down the window before we left and said, "We apologize, we didn't mean to disrupt your peace." Then I took a picture, and there are 3 super distinct faces in the picture. They are faces of textbook demons. Now the story gets even creepier, stick with me. According to Ariana, when she tried to send the picture to her manager the next day, she was met with an error message that read, "This file can't be sent. It's 666 megabytes. Weird things began to occur following the incident, and Ariana was forced to delete the picture. I quote, "I was going to sleep about 2 weeks ago. I had just gotten off the phone, and as soon as I closed my eyes I heard this really loud rumble right next to my head. When I opened my eyes it stopped immediately, but when I closed my eyes it started again with whispers. Every time I closed my eyes I started seeing these really disturbing images with red shapes. Then I opened my eyes and scooched over to the left side of my bed, and there was this massive black matter. I don't know what it was like a cloud of something black right next to me. I started crying. I watched it move to the front of my bed and then I fell asleep. I woke up and it was gone. Now, I'll be honest, it's hard for me to believe this one without the evidence to back it up, but if Ariana says it happened, then I guess it happened. Coming in at 3, please stop moving the kitchen table. Uploaded to my uni days by a user named Barbara, this story tells the haunting tale of ghosts that just won't stop messing with the kitchen table. I quote, "My house was fraught with weird stuff happening when we first moved in. The kitchen table would move overnight 12 to 18 inches. My keys will disappear and show up in the weirdest places like my quilt trunk." I don't know who has a quilt trunk these days, but this person does. "My son Christopher went into the basement and things came flying off the shelf at him. He also saw someone walking on our wraparound porch once, but no one was there. The most obvious one was a few years ago. Twice this happened. I was sweeping the kitchen floor. The door to the porch started shaking uncontrollably. It was like someone was trying to open the door without turning the knob. It lasted about 15 seconds. Keep in mind this is a wraparound porch completely enclosed. I knew it was bad because my dogs, who will bark at a butterfly flying past the window, all looked up at the door and stepped back. Both times it happened, I was doing the same thing about the same time at night. By the way, as a side note, I walked into the kitchen table one night while going to the bathroom. It was not the first time I walked into the kitchen table because it was moved. So I just said, please stop moving the kitchen table, and it never moved again. Spooky stuff. Do you believe Barbara's story? And if so, who do you think the ghost was? Former resident of the home perhaps, or just someone who was obsessed with moving kitchen tables? Perhaps a former interior designer? You never know. You don't know the story. Coming in at number 2, Demon in the Dark. Another creepy ghost story uploaded to my uni days. This one comes from a guy named Dave, who explains his very real encounter with a scary demon. "My family travelled to the south of France to stay in a cottage owned by someone my dad worked with. The owners visited occasionally, but that summer it was free and we had 10 days booked in there. After a long 2 days on the road, we drove down a steep driveway towards a secluded mill cottage, with the water wheel sat static alongside the stone house. There was a deep cellar with stone stairs down under the wheel next to the house, and a small river circled the place. We went into the house and chose rooms, but being set down in small copes, the house was a draft and cold from lack of use. And we settled in and turned all of the heating on, yet the house remained cold and felt damp. The first night we had set a fire in the living room and listened to a couple of my audiobooks before my sister and I went to sleep. My parents stayed up a little longer than went to bed. Around midnight they both woke up at exactly the same time, and the door to their bedroom was opening, slowly. At first they thought it was my sister, until they saw a large dark silhouette of a man framed in the doorway, standing stock still, just looking in their direction as if appraising them. After a short period the shape turned and started to move, as if satisfied, and disappeared completely. They looked at each other but didn't speak, and both went back to sleep. The next morning the house felt warm and dry, and sunlight was back through the windows as if something had lifted and accepted them. They spoke the next day and both agreed that although they were skeptics, it could not have been anything other than something supernatural in that doorway, deciding their worth. What do you guys think about that one? Demon encounter? Intruder? Or just trick of the light? Do you think there was a man there, or is this all pretend? You tell me. I think it was just an old house that took a little while to heat up. But that's not very scary, is it? And finally, coming in at number 1, Hotel Cecil. Of course, there is no building more haunted than the Cecil Hotel that has numerous unexplained deaths and hauntings that are still ongoing today, even after it changed its name to Stay on Main. Creepier still, there's an entire list of suicides reported on its Wikipedia page, with the first reported case happening in 1931, followed by a long string of similar deaths in 1932, 1934, 1937, 1938, 1939 and 1940. The 30s were not a good time for the Cecil, that's for sure. During the same time, other tenants of the building also died by suicide, and one man was pinned to the exterior wall by a truck. In 1962, a woman jumped from the 9th floor window and landed on a pedestrian, killing them both. In 1964, tenant Goldie Osgood was brutally murdered, which had remained unsolved. And of course, one of the most famous cases is that of Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old traveller who was found dead in the rooftop water tank of the hotel after guests began to complain of a funky taste. Now with this number, it isn't so much the ghosts themselves that are the unsolved haunting, but the hotel itself, which seems to curse anyone who stays in it or near it.
Coming in at number 5 is the Diablos of the Alamo. Located in San Antonio, Texas, the Alamo, formerly known as Mission San Antonio de Valero, is renowned for its pivotal role in the Texas Revolution. It was established by Spanish Franciscan friars in the early 18th century as a mission to convert the native people to Christianity. The mission eventually became a military outpost and acquired its famous name, the Alamo, after the cottonwood trees that surrounded it. It gained its notoriety during the Texas Revolution in 1836, when in a desperate attempt to defend Texas's independence from Mexico, a group of Texan freedom fighters, including James Bowie, William B. Travis, and Davy Crockett, held the Alamo against General Santa Anna's formidable Mexican forces. The siege lasted for 13 days, and despite their courageous efforts, the Texan defenders were overrun on March 6, 1836. The battle became a symbol of Texan determination and resistance, and "Remember the Alamo" became a rallying cry for the Texan forces, spurring them to victory in later battles. With such a rich history, and for it to be the resting place for countless dead soldiers, it's no wonder the Alamo is haunted to bits. It wasn't long after the Battle of the Alamo had ended that the first sightings of ghosts at the historical site began to surface. General Santa Anna, angered by the idea of the mission becoming a shrine to the rebellious Texans, ordered the historic church to be burnt down. However, when a group of cavalrymen arrived to carry out the task, they encountered 6 ghostly figures, which they called Diablos, standing before the Alamo, each holding a flaming sword. This scared the absolute socks off the soldiers sent to burn the Alamo, and they left with a chilling story to tell and soiled underwear. Rumor has it those entities protecting the Alamo were the spirits of the fallen soldiers from the battle. Others argue that they might be the old Franciscan monks who once guarded the mission. General Andrade, skeptical of the tales, decided to go to the Alamo himself to burn it down as ordered by General Santa Anna. But when he arrived with his men and directed them to the Longhouse Barracks, they witnessed a tall, male spirit on the roof with flaming balls in each hand. The sight was so terrifying that the soldiers dropped to their knees in fear, unable to proceed. Andrade and his troops quickly left the mission, never to return. In fact, neither Andrade nor Santa Anna would ever revisit the Alamo ever again, and over the next decade, the once historic site fell to ruin. The story of the warrior ghost and the terrifying encounters at the Alamo became part of the lore surrounding the haunted history of the site, contributing to its reputation as one of the most haunted places in the world. But hey, at least you know where to go in case you forgot to pack a lighter, right? And at number 4 is going to be the Pusher of West Point. Located in West Point, New York, the United States Military Academy, USMA for short, was established on the 16th of March, 1802. The Academy is a world-famous educational institution for cadets commissioning into the United States Army, and is the oldest of 5 American service academies. Being over 220 years old, it's no surprise that over the years, there have been several sightings of ghosts and unexplained events within the walls of the school. Cadets of both past and present have shared feelings of being watched by unseen presences while no one is there. There have also been a litany of reports of ghost sightings, with all sorts of cadets talking about seeing bone-chilling apparitions in the middle of the night. Though the most terrifying of these ghost stories comes from the early 1970s, known only as the Pusher, and the story goes like this. 2 a.m. on a gloomy October's night, 2 male cadets lay asleep in room 4714 of the North Barracks 47th Division. One of the cadets is woken up by some strange sounds they heard coming from the closet. Tired and concerned, the cadet opened the closet only to be greeted by the ghost of a soldier with eyes made of light that struck fear into the cadet like a bolt of lightning. Upon seeing the apparition, the cadet screamed and it would vanish. His roommate claimed he never saw a ghost, but felt an otherworldly coldness in the room. The ghost was described as a middle-aged soldier wearing an antique 1830s uniform with a cap, musket, and handlebar mustache. And after his first sighting, other cadets in and around the academy would report seeing the exact same ghost. He would eventually earn the nickname of the Pusher because his presence alone would make the environment so cold that his victims could do nothing but lay still until the pressure of his glacial aura relented. Due to fears of the Pusher's return, room 4714 was permanently vacated and it turned into a study area, which worked, as since then there have been no reports of the Pusher appearing in those barracks, which is a lot smarter than what I would do to avoid him. I'd probably just wear a jacket and call it a day. Anyway, next up at number 3 is the Curse of the Silent Mother. This paranormal account was posted to Reddit 7 years ago by user CatFace0, recalling firsthand his experience with ghosts during the Vietnam War. The story begins with the poster being recruited to the tunnel commandos because he was very short and could fit in tight spaces. He and the other commandos' jobs to operate within the many tunnel complexes within Vietnam. Usually he would operate within, forgive me for the pronunciation error, Cu Chi tunnels near Saigon. But on this particular day, he and another commando named Benoit were sent to investigate a tunnel complex west of, again, forgive my pronunciation, Da Nang. The freshly dug tunnel was incredibly claustrophobic, giving the two men little room to move, and it stunk of rotten flesh. After tunneling for what felt like hours, the two soldiers stumbled upon an empty room, lit only by a single gas lamp. Cautiously, the two men entered, only to find a stone staircase in the corner of the room, which was unusual, as the tunnel was already several feet deep, implying that this room has been around for much longer than the tunnels were. The pair descended down the stairs for hours on end, until reaching a door at the bottom, with light seeping from beneath. Upon entering, the soldiers came across a room with 10 or so people in it, all silently rocking back and forth, staring blankly at a small altar. No matter what the pair did, those 10 people wouldn't break from their rocking trance, with their eyes completely white, even their irises. When the tunnelers went to investigate the altar, they found only a small golden statue of a beautiful woman with tentacles for legs. And no, I'm not talking about Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Terrified, the two men destroyed the room and left in a hurry. The experience scared them so much, both requested to be removed from the tunneling commandos and transferred elsewhere. The request was accepted, but it wouldn't save them, as both men began reporting hearing strange voices and whispers at night, calling out to them saying the words, "Defiler, come to the Red House." They would hear this phrase constantly, impeding on sleep and ruining their mental condition, to the point that both men were discharged and sent back home. But the whispering wouldn't stop, and it only got worse. Both men would receive clay versions of the gold statue they saw in the mail, and that same statue was left in unexplained places like the glove compartment of their cars. Later, the two would discover that they were under the curse of something known as the Silent Mother, and the only way to break this curse was to visit an ancient shrine, which the two did in order to stop hearing those whispering voices. Upon finding the shrine, painted entirely in red, they would see the walls covered in human remains, and several statuettes of the octopus-legged woman, and another stone staircase, much like the one they found in the tunnel. One can only assume that this was the Red House that the soldiers were hearing the voice talk about so often. The pair descended down the staircase, and at the bottom they found a large wooden statue of that same golden figure they saw before, which would speak to them in the same voice that they heard the whispers in. It told them to repent for desecrating one of its holy sites, and began inching towards the two men. Fortunately, the two soldiers came prepared, and instead of succumbing to death by cursed statue, they blew the Red House up sky high, getting out of the shrine at the nick of time. Probably the most American solution to an ancient curse I've ever seen. And the craziest part about it worked. The two men for the rest of their lives reported that after the incident, they never heard strange whispers again. Moving on to number 2 are the unexplained disappearances in the Swiss Alps. Amidst the tumultuous Second World War, Switzerland, ever committed to maintaining neutrality, found itself in quite the pickle, coveted by Allied and Axis powers. When Germany's acts of aggressions encroached upon the Swiss borders, the United Kingdom swiftly dispatched a company of soldiers to reinforce the defense. Thus, fate placed one British unit in a remote village nestled within the serene Swiss Alps. In the first weeks of their arrival, the villagers observed an unsettling pattern of peculiar occurrences. Items mysteriously vanishing from people's homes, sheds, and all around the mountain village. While these were brushed off as simple robberies, things quickly went dark when a young man vanished without a trace. Initially deemed an unfortunate accident, fear took root as more and more people were inexplicably disappearing. The sudden disappearances of the village's residents gave rise to a chilling rumor that a malevolent creature lurked in the foreboding mountains. The fear reached a peak when Private Reginald, a member of the British contingent, would also go missing. One ominous night, patrolling soldiers saw a figure lurking outside a house, peering through the window. Alerted by the soldiers' shouts, the mysterious intruder fled in haste. Upon chasing after the elusive figure to the outskirts of the village, it would disappear. However, the chase was not in vain, as the soldiers were able to find a cave concealed in snow. They approached the cave with caution, and upon hearing shots, they fired back into the deep darkness. After being met with silence, they soldiered on until they found the half-eaten remains of 7 residents, and laying next to them was Private Reginald with a hole in his chest. Horror gripped the hearts of the soldiers as they pieced together the ghastly truth. It was not the machinations of some monstrous creature that plagues the village, but a monster among men, Reginald himself. I just don't get why he ate only a little bit of each victim though. Like, when I get a box of chicken wings, I don't half eat all of them, right? I finish each wing, then move on to the next. What a weirdo, right guys? yet. And topping it all off at number 1 is the Lady Be Good. This paranormal account surrounds the enigmatic story of a B-17 plane named the Lady Be Good during World War II. The aircraft, part of US Army Air Forces, disappeared without a trace in 1943 during a bombing mission over Italy. Despite extensive searches, the plane and its 9 crew members seem to have vanished into thin air. The crew was assumed to have fallen in battle, just another casualty of war. However, nearly 15 years later, an oil exploration team stumbled upon the remarkably preserved wreckage of the Lady Be Good in the Libyan desert, 430 miles away from their intended target. The investigators uncovered clues that revealed the crew's desperate attempts to survive the crash and find their way back to safety. However, there was not a single body in sight. Exploring the Libyan desert, investigators would search far and wide for the remains of the crew of the Lady Be Good, but much to their chagrin, nothing would be found. Their mysterious disappearance became a subject of debate among military members and scientists alike, but the mystery would deepen when other pilots began reporting that they saw the Lady Be Good flying in the air. With its crashed remains lying in the Libyan desert, many were baffled by the return of the aircraft and were quick to call it a ghost plane. After this, many more appearances of crashed planes would appear in the air again, distracting and confusing soldiers on both sides of the war. The mystery to how the Lady Be Good returned is still up for debate to this day, but if I've learned one thing today, it's that some things are better left as just mysteries. Jumping right into number 5 is the Mary Celeste. Formerly known as the Amazon, the Mary Celeste was an American merchant brigantine under the captaincy of Benjamin Spooner Briggs. In October of 1872, Briggs would captain the Mary Celeste and prepare for the boat's first voyage. Accompanied by his wife Sarah, their young daughter Sophia, and a crew of 8 carefully selected men, Briggs would set course for Genoa, Italy on November 5th, carrying 1,701 barrels of booze. Days after their departure, another brigantine from Canada, the De Gracia, would set course for Gibraltar, following a similar route to the Mary Celeste. On December 4th, 1872, the helmsman of the De Gracia reported that a strange vessel was heading unsteadily towards it from about 10 kilometers or 6 miles away. The unidentified ship's strange and erratic movements tipped off to the De Gracia's captain that something was wrong, and the Canadian brigantine would proceed with caution. As the mysterious ship drew close, members of the crew noticed that there was no one on it, and when it wouldn't respond to any signals sent to it from the De Gracia, 2 crew members would board the ship in order to investigate. It was at this point that the pair would find out that this mysterious empty ship was the Mary Celeste. The sails on the abandoned brig were set in poor condition, much of the rigging was damaged, ropes hung loosely over the sides, the compass was broken, a significant amount of water was found in the boat, and its only lifeboat was missing. However, all of the ship's cargo remained relatively intact. The 2 crewmates also found the ship's daily log in a cabin. Its final entry dated at 8 a.m. on November 25th, 9 days earlier. The log places the Mary Celeste's last known position nearly 750 kilometers, which is 400 nautical miles, away. The De Gracia and its crew would split up in order to bring the Mary Celeste to their destination, Gibraltar, where they would sell the ship in order to be salvaged. The disappearance of the Mary Celeste's crew is a mystery to behold, as the remains of Captain Briggs, his family, and his crew have yet to be found to this day. And over those years, various theories and explanations have been made. Some say there was an accidental explosion caused by one of the barrels of alcohol aboard the ship. Water spouts damaging the ship is another theory, pirates, or even alien abduction. Personally, I think the crew may have taken the lifeboat deep into the ocean and perished while lost at sea. Make sure to comment below your own theories on the matter. Anyway, regardless of how it happened, the Mary Celeste acts as one of the earliest examples of the Bermuda Triangle's mysterious nature and highlights the dangers that comes with venturing into the unknown. Next up at number 4 is the Great Isaac Cay Lighthouse. Constructed in the mid-19th century on a remote island in the Bahamas, the Great Isaac Cay Lighthouse was a beacon of hope for any mariners trying to navigate the treacherous waters. It stood tall, proud, and bright, warning sailors of the rocks that lurked beneath the waves. The island it was on was desolate, only accessible by boat and inhabited by the keepers of the lighthouse, John and William. It was the keepers' job to make sure the beacon's light remained operational, while performing a fair share of arduous and difficult tasks in order to maintain the lighthouse. And I know, this is starting to sound a lot like the movie The Lighthouse, but this story ends a whole lot differently. On the fateful day of August 4th, 1969, shortly after a storm, a supply ship is scheduled to bring essentials for the keepers, such as food, toilet paper, and the like. However, When the ship arrives, it's met with an eerie silence. When the supply crew noticed that the lighthouse was strangely unlit, they immediately alerted authorities, and a search party was dispatched to the island. Upon arrival, the search party found the lighthouse deserted and the island it rested on just as desolate. The only clues were some open doors and entries missing from the lightkeeper's log, which only left more questions than answers. Theories and rumors quickly began to circulate after the sudden disappearance, many claiming the two lightkeepers were taken by pirates or robbers. Some thought they were killed in a storm. But honestly, if I was stuck on a remote island taking care of a lighthouse, I'd probably find a way to disappear too. Though deep down, we already know who, or rather what, was to blame: the mysterious nature of the Bermuda Triangle. A year after the incident, the Great Isaac K Lighthouse was made to be automated so that no other inexplicable disappearances could occur again, and John and William were never seen or heard from again after the incident, marking another unsolved mystery stemming from the Devil's Triangle. And at number 3 is the USS Cyclops. The USS Cyclops was one of 4 bulk cargo ships built for the United States Navy a few years before the beginning of World War I. It gets its namesake from the Cyclops, a race of one-eyed giants from Greek mythology. The whopping 542-foot collier set sail from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil on February 16, 1918, carrying a cargo of manganese ore bound for Baltimore, Maryland. It was due to arrive at its destination by the 13th of March. The ship, under the command of Lieutenant Commander George W. Worley, had a crew of 309 officers and men on board. The ship, having been built in 1910, was not on its first journey. In fact, this was a trip the boat had made many times before, and one its crew was very familiar with. However, there were a couple problems with the ship. One was that the ship was struggling with engine trouble after departing, and the other was that the ship was carrying too much cargo, leaving it to be overloaded. The crew did not see these issues glaring enough to delay their journey and made their way through the Atlantic anyway. Time would fly, and the boat's journey seemed to be going as planned, the Cyclops being last seen by another vessel only 4 days before their date of arrival. Yet, there were no reports of the cargo ship reaching its intended destination of Baltimore. In fact, the ship was nowhere to be found, and contact with the rest of the US Navy and the world had been completely cut off. This was during World War I. The original assumption of most was that the USS Cyclops had been destroyed in combat. However, there was never a distress signal sent from the ship, nor were any remains found of the ship. Even after a thorough search of the area it was last known to be, these remains were still not found. It had completely disappeared. Reports indicate that there was a violent storm around the area that the military vessel would have been a day after it was last seen. A common theory behind the USS Cyclops vanishing is that the terrible storm sank the boat, as it was already suffering from engine troubles and was overloaded with cargo. Though, that still doesn't explain the lack of any remains or signals sent by the crew, but the mystery doesn't end there. The same exact vanishing would happen to 2 of the Cyclops' sister ships, Proteus and Nereus, during World War II. They would both disappear without a trace like the Cyclops before them, both within the Bermuda Triangle. Speaking of World War II, is Flight 19 at our number 2 spot. Flight 19 is the codename of a training mission that would happen on December 5th, 1945. It was comprised of 5 bomber planes taken from the Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale in Florida. Flight 19 was tasked with navigating a triangular route over the Atlantic, known as the navigation problem number 1, before returning to base. Weather conditions were reported to be clear skies and calm winds. Sounds simple enough, right? Think again. Because shortly after takeoff, radio transmissions from the 5 torpedo bombers indicated the pilots were disoriented. They claimed that they couldn't identify their location at all. The flight instructor at the time, Lieutenant Taylor, told the team that he believed that they were flying over the Florida Keys, an incorrect calculation that would send them off course and towards the Bermuda Triangle. Radio control would continue to try guiding the pilots back to base, but things started to go wrong when radio contact with Flight 19 suddenly came to a stop. I'm sure by now you know the story. A massive search and rescue operation was launched involving several aircrafts and ships, but no trace of Flight 19 was found. In fact, during the search for Flight 19, another aircraft vanished without a trace, adding to the mystery. Many blame the disappearance of Flight 19 on natural magnetic anomalies and unexpected storms, but the truth to where those 14 crew members on the training mission went remains unknown. With all these disappearances across the years, it begs the question of where all these boats and planes are disappearing to. Do you guys have any theories? Let me know in the comments. And topping it all off at number 1 is none other than the Ellen Austin. The Ellen Austin was a massive 3-masted American schooner built in 1854. The vessel would regularly ply between London, England and New York, crossing through the Bermuda Triangle. It wouldn't be until 1881, during another London to New York trip, would the Ellen Austin and its crew come across another ship on the Atlantic. This unknown ship was seemingly adrift and unmanned, so the crew of the Ellen Austin boarded the abandoned ship to investigate. The crew found found that the ship was in perfect condition, but completely empty, raising questions as to why it was abandoned in the first place. After this discovery, the crew of the Ellen Austin decided to split their crew and tow the ship in order to salvage it and make some extra money. During this towing, the two vessels were hit by an unexpected storm, separating them from each other. However, the Ellen Austin and the abandoned ship would find each other again. However, the abandoned ship was vacant once again. The crew of the Ellen Austin would try to tow the ship again, but much to their dismay, the same exact thing would happen. Big storm, the ship gets separated, and the crew is completely gone, with the ship still intact. And before they could find the ship again, what little was left of the Ellen Austin's crew would depart hastily, in fear of this cursed abandoned ship. This mysterious ship and its disappearing crew members quickly became a legend of the Bermuda Triangle, as reports of seeing the same abandoned ship were made, not only years, but centuries later, still in perfect condition. The true origins of this mysterious ship remain unknown, but it is said that the ship is an embodiment of the Bermuda Triangle's curse, vanishing any seafarer that tries to board it. But honestly, it's got nothing on any of the crazy pirates you see in Pirates of the Caribbean, so there's that at least, right?